Yesterday, the State Board of Education, Republicans and Democrats basically speaking with one voice and asking the state attorney general to pass muster on whether or not a new education department created by the executive branch is in line with the state constitution, which says the State Board of Education and the Michigan Department of Education should have a primacy when it comes to controlling K through 12 education. Nikki Snyder is a Republican on the State Board of Education. She's also a candidate for Senate, and she joins us live this morning. Ms. Snyder, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
This is one of those interesting times when we see Republicans and Democrats speaking with one voice on something by an 8-0 margin. You said what? That you object to what she's doing, or that you need clarification because you have concerns?
Well, I certainly object to it, have my fair share of concerns, but I think the board spoke unanimously by vote to get an AG opinion on a new bureaucratic entity that's put in place via executive order that intends to administer policy on pre-K, some K-12 programming, and some higher education. So, we know that the Constitution in Michigan elects 8 members statewide to a State Board of Education to oversee all of public education. That's what's specifically written in our Constitution. And there's also specific intention of separating those powers from the control of the governor. So, from a body's perspective, I think yesterday we simply said, hey, this is what the Constitution says. We'd like to see what our AG has. What is her opinion? I don't know that that will satisfy the concerns of the fact that this is, in fact, unconstitutional. I think that a court would have to determine that.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Snyder, if the Board of Education is responsible for education and the governor's My Leap office is focusing on early childhood education, higher education, educational partnerships, is there really significant overlap, or is this group focusing on items not part of the Board of Ed's primary mission?
There is significant overlap. The Michigan Department of Education already handles GSRP, which is our pre-K that is administered through the government. We handle all of K through 12 and some higher education, like community colleges, and standards and protocols that are consistent with the Constitution. So there is significant overlap. This would be taking services that are administered by policy that the State Board of Education manages and the Michigan Department of Education administers and removing it and putting it in a different body.
The Whitmer administration is quoted as saying that they consulted with Dana Nessel before taking this action, and she raised no objections. If that's true, and if the AG gives you a clarification in that regard and says she sees no separation of powers problem, what then?
So put it on paper is basically what we would ask her to do, and it wouldn't stop board members from having the ability and or the reasonable judgment to potentially take legal action after that. Again, it is unconstitutional. There are 2 other things that, education mind-oriented people understand, that this is also a very ineffective policy in education. We have multiple voices in education that make policy, and so there's so much space being taken up by an education establishment that constituents have very little room to be heard, right? And so we know that it's worth it to move forward and take action if we need to. We don't want to reduce access to education at this point in time for Michiganders. Mm-hmm. There are too many layers of bureaucracy to sift through. I want to break it down just very briefly. We have a U.S. Department of Education, a Michigan Department of Education, a State Board of Education. The legislature writes policies and laws through laws in education. We have intermediate school districts. We have local school districts and local school boards. I hope your head is spinning by now, because if you're a parent, I don't even know where they start. And really, their voice is so small, right? So the insignificance of a family's and children's needs within that governance structure couldn't be more clear. So do I think that the structure of governance in education needs to change? Yes, but not by adding an extra layer through an extra bureaucratic body and entity to make parents sift through.
Bottom line, you say there's enough cooks in the kitchen already and it's getting crowded.
Oh, yes, that's a great way to put it.
In the original statement, though, from the governor, she said that My Leap is going to partner with the Department of Education and the State Board of Education. You anticipate any outreach from My Leap, and will it truly be a partnership?
Yeah, I think it's an extra layer of bureaucracy that's not necessary. We want a partnership with parents. That's the move we should be making. So any governance structure change, any change in education at this point in time, especially post-COVID, should be with the specific intention of partnering with parents.
Mm-hmm. There is some, though, constitutional power in the executive branch to reorganize or organize state agencies, including some offices that fall under the Michigan Department of Education. And we saw Governor Engler do this when he shifted testing requirements to the Treasury Department. So are there some exceptions to the rule? And if we've seen Republican governors do this, why isn't it permissible in this case?
Yeah, it's hard to pitch that effectively because, again, the Constitution vests the power of oversight in public education into a state board of education that is elected statewide by 8 members. So, sure, there may be powers within our Constitution to reorganize certain things from executive order like she has done, or maybe Republican governors have done in the past, but not in such an overt overstepping of another constitutional amendment that's very clear.
Right. Nikki Snyder, thank you so much for joining us. Board of Ed representative serving as a Republican on that board, and some might chalk this up to a turf battle. I think it's much more consequential than that. And as we have seen the test scores, we need everybody holding an oar and pulling in the same direction here, and that's something that every Michigander hopes for, I'm sure. So thank you for being with us, and we'll follow this clarification when and if it comes from the Attorney General.
Thank you.